Okay, so welcome everyone. What is the best achievement in 2025 for you, Clark and Rowan? So maybe we can start with Clark.
Best achievement? Oh man, I didn't die. I mean, I think to get let's start off on a little spicy note. I mean, I've been very much thinking along the lines of what you can remove to achieve things, right? So, if you I like this saying recently: you can't win a race in the first turn, but you can lose it there. And it's sort of like, how do you live forever? You just don't die. So, I mean, I made it. I'm still living forever. So far, so good. My biggest achievement is that I didn't die.
I think that's the most fascinating achievement of all time. I mean, that you survived and we all survived 2025. So that's a great achievement as well. So how about you, Rowan?
My answer is much more boring. I don't know. Professionally, I think I'm proud that I wrote some book chapters this year, which is a first for me.
Nice.
And then personally, I started playing music again in a community band. So I get to meet with them weekly and, we play all the classics, everything in between.
Okay, so that's great to hear. And that's also will be coupled to the topic that we would like to discuss today. And we explore the complexity in science, business, technology, research, maybe politics, and many more. So what the book is about?
Yeah, it's two different ones. So one is called The Power of Connection. It's enabling collaborative analysis basically on like cloud computing using oncology is kind of the main analysis kind of focus. And this is in cancer systems biology. And then another one is just kind of how to go about building a portable and reproducible cancer informatics workflow that can be scalable. So they're, similar-ish topics. One is more focused on workflow building and one is just kind of harnessing cloud. Yeah. So, and that one's in cancer bioinformatics.
Okay, so that's great because that touches also the topic of today, which we are going to start with quantum computing. In 2025, that was the year of quantum computing. There was a lot of hope about quantum computing computational advantage. Also, there were new achievements in error correction that have been published. However, we still all feel there is a long road to achieve this computational advantage. And this brings me to the first question for Clark. What's your favorite quantum architecture?
Again, sort of going backwards. I'm very much in favor of things that we can. I use like probabilistic programming, evolutionary programming, to try to figure out what we can do better still on a laptop than a quantum computer, right? So my favorite quantum computing software architecture is like a laptop. But from like from my history, I still really like annealing. I mean, annealing is one of the things I use all the time, and I know it's not a universal quantum computer, but I really, 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 really love annealing. I think that has the most likely architecture to actually get some advantage, but even if it's on specialized problems.
Yeah, that's definitely that's the case. Annealing also has very powerful analog features as well. But this brings me to the following question: when we are gonna see a full molecular simulation performed on a quantum computer, do you think the annealing would win in this case, or the universal gate-based quantum computing?
I'm a little bit skeptical as to whether we can actually do that. I mean, I think, what do we want to say here, right? The point of quantum computing is that it relies on quantum mechanics, right? So Taha and I were together in Egypt for the National Quantum Hackathon at the Library of Alexandria, which was super awesome. Maybe that was actually the highlight of the year for me, instead of not dying, juror in the quantum hackathon. But the point is, I asked this question right at the beginning of my talk about how tall can you build a Lego tower? And the answer is, well, it kind of depends on what your rules are. If you're looking at math rules, it's infinity. Just stick Lego bricks together forever and ever and ever and ever. There's no limit. And then there's this physical answer of, well, if I build it taller than my house, do I worry about wind and birds flying into it? And what is there some physical limit? And the point is that you really have to separate mathematical computing, which is what laptops are, from physical computing, which is what quantum computers are. Now, the physical rule is that you can't get past the uncertainty limit, right? This is the way to secure any network against a quantum attack, is to make sure that the encryption key has to violate the uncertainty limit on the quantum computer side. And you're safe. Done. Right? Simply done. I think molecular simulations run up against that limit a lot faster than we want to believe they do. Right? Because precision in mathematical computing is not limited. Right? How many digits of pi can we calculate? 31.4 trillion, right? Pi 10 pi trillion, I think, digits is how many we can get. There is no physical way to get that kind of precision on a quantum computer. Like, it just violates all the rules of physics. So how much precision do you need to actually do a full molecular simulation? I don't know. Is the molecule H2? Because maybe you could do H2. You
Yeah.
might be able to do water, might be able to do CO2. But when you're talking about big molecules, sort of like, let's talk about just even like a glucose molecule. I don't know. I don't know if we will actually ever get enough firepower and precision and fault tolerance to get there. I think it violates some like actual physical rules, but not mathematical rules.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Before going to Rowan, would like to mention here, because this is very important point that people overthink the quantum computing capabilities in this sense. If we look about relativity to compute the ground state of hydrogen molecule using relativistic quantum mechanics, it's really, you need very massive supercomputer to achieve this kind of precision. And then the question is, can we compute this relativistic precision for larger molecules using quantum computing? And then, yeah, that's still maybe some of the audience don't get the idea that quantum computer don't compute digits, but they compute more gradients and patterns. So what is the aim for? So Rowan, what is the computational advantage or the purpose of quantum computing in your perspective, and how this can help you on oncology?
Well, okay. So to back up what Clark was saying just moments ago, really right now, no computer, whether it's quantum or classical, can really fully model every electron, every atom in any kind of biological molecule large enough, like a protein or a DNA strand. But what we can do is approximate using different levels of the detail. So quantum computing helps with things like classical simulations. So we can show how atoms move and interact in small scales. We could also use it for chemistry. So how electrons move can be described more accurately. But this does get basically impossibly expensive and complex as the system gets bigger. Even as Clark mentioned, something as small as like caffeine is going to be just really quite impossible at the moment. So a full simulation, as you had mentioned, would mean, solving the behavior of all particles at once. And that's a level of accuracy that we can't do right now. But, to be positive, I do see something like this happening in the future. Let's say a protein, it would require a lot of error-corrected quantum computers that are more powerful and stable than what we have currently. And I think we're working towards this. I just don't think we're there right now. But that's where it would help, is just actually solving the mystery behind every single particle kind of all at once. It's complex here because it's not just looking between two molecules and the connection between them. It's multiple at once, and this grows more and more complex as structures grow as well. But we are seeing a lot of cloud-based quantum tools emerging. With AWS has like Bracket and Azure Quantum, things like that. So they're letting researchers experiment with quantum chemistry algorithms and kind of slowly integrating these into existing pipelines. So I don't know, I feel like I spoke all over the place, but slowly we're getting there. We're just building one piece at a time, but we're not there yet.
Okay, so that's great that you are positive about quantum computing. And this brings me to the following question, because we see now the quantum computing has a particular purpose, which is computing gradients, patterns, computing surfaces, but then they cannot provide precision, as Clark already pointed out earlier. Then we come to the tightly integrated high performance computing and quantum computing. And would you think that AI with this tightly integrated architecture can help providing value for computing ground states or the eigenvalues or the spectrum of larger molecules?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in. So when we talk about integration with quantum computing, it's kind of just how we have these quantum processors and how they talk to classical processing. I'm trying to think of how to explain this. That's kind of just defining tight integration, I think, in my mind. Let's see, we're not really near there yet, is the problem. I know we talk a lot about, mathematical certainty with quantum computing and things like that. But when actually applying it to real molecules, again, it's almost impossible. We need almost absolute zero vacuum chambers to be able to actually hold things steady and keep things cool enough. This is difficult in particular when it comes to biology, because we need generally a warm, wet, chemically complex environment, which makes everything even more complex when you're actually trying to solve for pieces at a time. I hope that made sense.
I think that's
I
a
don't know.
really
Clark,
good segue. I think that's a really good segue. I mean, the point is that I've come at this from a number of angles, and let's maybe talk about supply chain and logistics. It's in the sense of having a lot of noise, right? that's a warm and wet environment, which is chemically complex, is going to necessarily have a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of like pollutants in the chemical equation, right? So the point is that the way that we think about quantum computing, the way that we think about optimization is that we have a nice, clean lab environment, but reality is just not anywhere near that, right? And so there are going to be like specific certain advantages for doing very, very small tasks. But I think it limits out there because there's no way to actually just deal with noise, right? I talk to a lot of people right now. The only way to really lose, it's not quitting. That's terrible advice. Don't tell kids this. Never quit. Don't ever tell kids this. That's the worst advice you can give to kids. The advice you need to give to kids and to anyone doing anything is don't try to fight chaos. That's how you lose. Right, you can't fight chaos. That's the recipe for losing.
Quit when you need to.
But
Quit when you need to.
strategy.
Exactly. Know when to hold them. Know when to fold them. Right. Sometimes you can't actually win, but never quit. That's a terrible advice. The correct advice is don't fight chaos.
Yeah, I think that's a very golden advice, and this is also against the mainstream because there is typically you get all of these videos which maybe the presenters they over do the advice to quit whenever you are not comfortable, find an alternative path, but it's not all the time easy to find an alternative path if the person cannot live with or cannot accommodate the current situation. But this brings me back to the quantum computing, because now we are sort of in this computing paradigm. We have different architectures. We have quantum computing, we have the GPU-based computing, we have the CPU-based computing, and each one of these, there are some expectations to be done, which is the limitation of what we can do and so on. But then we have one main hurdle in all of this, which is energy that's consumed by the supercomputers, the GPUs, and now the quantum computers with different architectures, in particular the architectures that require a huge cryogenics to work. And this brings me to the brain. The brain is very efficient. However, the way that the brain compute is still not well precisely known. So do you think the brain really compute? How about you, Clark?
I mean, I think that's a really, really, really excellent question, right? And if we knew the answer to that, we wouldn't be on a podcast. We would be like ultra super rich trillionaires. But here's the best guess.
Yes.
Right? Here's the best guess, though. The point is, in order to get like on the computing side to get to a point where we can actually have universal quantum computation or quantum computational advantage, there's a completely new rethink needed, right? It can't be gate computers. That is not how the brain works, right? There's been a lot of biology inspired computing. I've worked in genetic algorithms, and simulated annealing is not exactly biology, but it's sort of in that same vein of evolutionary programming, right? So a lot of what I have found to be very successful programming is trying to emulate what nature does as simply as possible in code, right? That to me has been the most successful thing. And I don't think that gate-based quantum computing is that. Gate-based quantum computing to me is trying to simulate how linear algebra works up to some fault tolerance level, right? So in order to get to the point where a computer, a supercomputer, a quantum computer, a hybrid, a neuromorphic alien tech from the 23rd century, I don't care what it is, in order to get to a point where that can work as efficiently as a brain, we need a complete rethink of how we actually do computing. Because the brain does a lot more than compute, right? The brain feels. The brain, it does computation. It thinks. It has automatic responses. It keeps me breathing. It keeps me sitting here. Like my muscles are all sort of engaged, sort of in the background, right? It's my operating system. The operating system for a human body is very, 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 very complex. And on top of that, you have a brain that's able to talk and speak and drink coffee at the same time. I think in order to achieve that, there's just got to be a total rethink. And I haven't done it yet, obviously, and no one has, but we need just a complete rethink of how we actually carry out computations to get to anywhere near what a human brain efficiency is. It has several million years of advantage. Computers have been around since 1944-ish, somewhere in there. Machine learning algorithms since 1943, a year before digital computers or analog computers. That's less than a century. Human brains got millions of years of evolutionary advantage on it.
Yeah, that's definitely. And for the quantum computing part, because this brings us to the way that you define the architecture of computing, that we are trying to map linear algebra operations on a quantum architecture, but we are not really simulating the real quantum operations, which is done in analog way in principle, not in the way that we define logical operations. And this is the same for the brain. So this brings me to the point that Roger Penrose has already put forward, how we can define the thinking in the brain, because now the brain thinks in analog way. There is no way to define rules or logical rules or anything. We are also evaluate based on experience, based on knowledge. There is some sort of evaluation on the fly based on practice and experience that happen in the brain. So with this in mind, how we can quantify the thinking process? How about you, Rowan? How do you quantify the thinking in the brain?
Yeah. So I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know enough about this generally. I think most neuroscientists and physicists both actually think the brain, kind of going back to our previous conversation, is too warm and too noisy for quantum states to survive long enough for us to say that the brain operates with, quantum computation. It's an interesting theory, but yeah, I don't think that's the case there as far as like how the brain actually does work and consciousness works. Yeah, I wish I had an answer to that. I mean, machines think computationally, right? But they're not self-aware. They cannot be self-reflective. They don't have that sense that seems really uniquely limited to, let's say, the brain for right now. So yeah, I mean, it's a weird theory. It's really interesting, but I think if we're going to try to model the brain, we need to actually rethink how we're doing this quantum computing and architecture. I mean, I don't know deep mathematical details about how these algorithms work, but I know enough to think it's not enough currently.
Well, maybe
And now let's squeeze the word quantum officially.
Yeah, let me reframe that question just slightly. I mean, I think that's a really good point that Ron made. But something I've been asking recently is, do we actually know the correct questions to ask to a quantum computer? Right? Having studied physics years ago, and my friends used to say this thing. They used to say, nature will always provide the answer. You just have to ask the right question. And I think that's kind of the strategy of quantum computing. You're asking this question in a quantum mechanical way and trying to get an answer out. But I think we're not exactly asking the right questions. Right? And I think I do a lot of optimization in my work, and I just don't think that even though quantum computers we have found ways to make them do optimization problems fast, they're not that big and they're not that complex. Really, the global optimum is not the thing you want. We live in a messy world. Really, what you want is like a list of the next like 15 best options in case something goes wrong. Right? So maybe it's we don't actually know the correct questions to ask a quantum computer yet. That might be some of the holdups.
I think that can be true for the mathematical sense, but when it comes to biology, there's not often one right question. It's so unique per person. If you're thinking about something as complex as cancer, let's say, there's not one cure or solution that we know of. We can't just ask, hey, why is it behaving like this in this one particular person? We might be able to get an answer to that one specific aspect of something, but it's not really, we can't apply that broadly to a larger picture.
Exactly.
And
So
this
what
brings
would
me
that
to
look
the
like? Go ahead. Taha, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, okay, if we now squeeze the word quantum in the system, would you imagine that the brain would work as a quantum computer? Because if yes, then that would mean that we are, as also you pointed out on the Rowan earlier, we are applying the quantum algorithms wrongly on the quantum architecture. But then we back again to analog system that Rowan was pointing out, that we don't have really a specific question or a right question. We have bunch of questions that maybe the expectation of these questions or the average response might be the right answer. So what's your vision about this?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I have no idea. I think we might have some type of quantum computation happening in the brain, but like I said, there's more to it than that. We cannot just say this is how it operates, period. There has to be something that we're not understanding or missing or just not even aware of right now. So kind of going back to asking the right questions, I think that's going to be very important, but you are limited in what questions you ask based on the knowledge that you have at the moment. So I don't know. In the next 10 years, I'm really curious to see what we do learn and how our questions actually evolve with the new knowledge that we have coming in. I think that will help us to understand better and make kind of like general patterns or trends that we can notice, especially when you apply this to treating patients in really any disease or illness state.
How about you, Clark?
I'm mostly aligned with Ron's response here. I think there's yeah, there's a lot of breakthroughs needed till we get there. Right? 2025, we read a lot of quantum breakthrough there's a lot of breakthroughs and we still haven't got to like 30 qubits as like sufficiently good algorithms. So there's a lot of breakthroughs needed on the algorithmic and the hardware side before we can actually give a good answer to that question. And I want to actually go back and point out something Ron said that I think is like very, very important. Like there's not a right answer. I think we very often in computing get stuck in this, is this right? Is this wrong? And especially in decision theory, like, did I make the right decision? So it doesn't work like that. There's some goodness of decision. How good was your decision? Not like the right. There might be several really great decisions, right? So there's something in this. And I think part of our problem is that we are still asking questions in the way of what's the right answer. Whereas in really, really, really complex systems, that's not how the question should even be framed. So again, there's a tremendous
That's really
amount of
well said.
rethink. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that was really well said. That was a nice way of summarizing the problem, I think, is there's no right or wrong. It's just kind of what sense can we make with what we have currently.
This is pretty fascinating. Thanks for pointing this out. And this brings me to the point where is the hurdle or the barrier of development in quantum computing comes from? Does it come from the algorithmic side or from the hardware side? Because the hardware side, sometimes it follows the way that the algorithms are designed. So they have to apply gates, synthesize some gates on a chip in a silicon-based architectures, and so on. So sometimes the hardware is bounded by the way that we comprehend or understand the quantum systems in algorithmic way. So how we can find a workaround this to have a quantum leap and advance the field without being coupled in this infinite loop.
Yeah, Clark, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with Candace and Frank on Impact Quantum podcast a few months ago, and this question came up, like this exact question. So Candace asked me, what's the difference in the hardware and the software side? And at that point, and I guess still my answer is like they're not really disconnected. And I think Taha just pointed out very well that the specific architectures are really built to the algorithms. And so my current thinking on quantum computing is there are a lot of different types of qubits, right? We haven't really defined what that is. That's sort of company by company and industry by industry. My take on how quantum computing is going to advance is that we're going to start building specialized hardware to solve specialized problems. And I'm actually pretty good with that way of doing it. Ways of building qubits for gate computing are going to be better tuned to solving specific types of problems, but they're not going to be able to solve all of the different types of problems. And I think that generally is a really good way for us to go, right? I think we got past that in digital computing and analog computing in the 70s, maybe not with the firepower, but up until that point, like computers like digital computers were being built to solve like specific types of problems. And even at that point, people were saying, I don't think we're ever going to need them in our homes. Why would anyone ever have one of these things? We kind of got past that, but I don't think we're past that in quantum computing. I think for the next decade, 20, 30 years, we're going to still have to be building very specialized architecture to solve very specific problems. And I think not only that a worthwhile mathematical and engineering and scientific pursuit, I think there's a lot of industrial application that can happen there if we could really just restrict ourselves from saying what's the right way of building a quantum computer to what's a good way to build a quantum computer to solve this problem, right? I think turning that phrasing into what's a good way to do this for this particular area of study is probably a more beneficial method of going about for like the general of the scientific community.
One of things, thanks Clark for pointing to this out under one. One of things that really challenges the current industry is the way that we define the general purpose quantum computers. That the definition is sort of has some, it's elusive. It's not really well defined. I mean, in a sense that to be a definition, so it varies from one industry to another. So, some people who does not get the details or they are not acquainted with the specifics of this definition, they think that the quantum computers can do pretty much any operation that we do in classical, because this is a computer theory vision of the quantum computer. And if we wanted to add many numbers or perform divisions or matrix multiplications, we sort of need an infinite way of performing the measurements. And this is what we use in quantum computing, and we still have a knowledge gap about it in quantum mechanics itself, the way that we perform a measurement. And this brings me to Roger Penrose's idea about this. First, we need to answer from both of you. Do we need consciousness to compute or not? So about your one,
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. No,
does the brain
maybe.
needs to have a
So
I'm
consciousness
glad you
thinking
asked
to
relative.
isn't
think or
always
not? Yeah.
required. What was that?
I'm glad he asked you first.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, does thinking require consciousness? Machines can think, right, computationally. They are not self-aware, though. They don't have that inner sense. I don't know that. I guess it depends on how we're defining consciousness, too. But I don't have a good answer. I just don't know whether that's required or not. I know we can probably do a lot without it so far. It's something we'll have to come to when we get there, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I might have maybe some biological systems who are self-behaved. So, how about you, Clark? So now, yeah,
No,
what's your vision on this?
I don't think so, but this is a very qualified answer. If we were going to take this to Kalshi or poly market, I wouldn't put a lot of money on it. Right? I don't think we need consciousness to do computing. The certainty in my answer is very low. Not very helpful
Yeah,
for the
but
listeners and watchers, but
that's a good perspective, because this brings me to the second point, because one of things, and in one of the debates that some people from Roger Penrose's school, and I'm referring to it because it's just all the time it points out to the gap or the incomplete knowledge of quantum mechanics or the incompleteness of the quantum theory. And one of things is that the consciousness of the observer can alter the outcomes of the measurement. And in that sense, it's not obviously for me correct, because if you have a measurement tool, I mean, you can measure a particle could be absorbed by a planet or by any object in the space, regardless if we exist or not. So how our presence in the universe can impact the outcome without really touching or interacting with a physical tool on the measurement. So this is why I was asking this question: consciousness really alter reality or not, in your perspective?
Yeah, so okay. I think this is a fascinating question. I think I don't know, it's like where's the line between philosophical discussion about quantum computing and sci-fi? I think honestly, okay, so in quantum mechanics, measurement collapses a wave function. Like the observation does affect things, but that doesn't mean that human awareness is the cause. That doesn't mean that consciousness is the cause. It's like a measurable effect. It's the observation, it's photons, it's things interacting, not just consciousness. So yeah, the system interacts with its environment, but I don't think the consciousness is what is affecting anything.
Yeah, totally agreeing. How about you, Clark? What's your take on
yeah,
this?
no idea here, but I wanted to give this analogy here that again, this is from Egypt. We were talking to Professor Ahmed Shawki Musa. He's a professor of high performance computing, and we were sitting at breakfast one morning listening to Feiruz, of course, which is like what you should do at breakfast. But he said,
Classically.
yeah, how can you go breakfast without that? So he said this is a sort of like there's not exactly a yes and a no, right? Whatever is in nature isn't a straight line, but he said how many grains of sand does it require to make a pile? Right? And that's a really good question. So I've been thinking about this for months now since he just asked me this question. He said, you have a pile of sand, you take out a few grains, is it still a pile of sand? Yes. You take out a few grains, it's still a pile of sand. At what point is it not a pile of sand? You can count 18 grains. Where is it, right? So the idea is, right, this is fuzzy logic. And so you have some sort of membership function. These are clearly piles, those are clearly not, but somewhere in between, it's like, how much of a pile is it, right? It's not, yes, it's a pile, no, it's not a pile. And there's a lot of situations where that is very, very much the case. And to my understanding of how thought works, or quantum measurement really is what we're talking about. I don't know what is like the thing that's like it's been measured, it's not been measured, right? I don't know if there's like a very, very clear line. And I think this is kind of the trick in quantum mechanics. What makes it so difficult is that there is that uncertainty. Right? There is always an uncertainty limit. There's always some fuzziness in quantum mechanics. Like that is the principal fundamental rule that separates the quantum realm of physics from the classical realm of physics. Okay, so what causes the measurement? I don't know. Is it consciousness? I don't know. I can't say, and I can't say for certain. I can only say to within some tolerance.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I think Professor Ahmed Shawki Musa has already explained about it, because when he taught me the first class on computational physics, we got this kind of questions. How we know that a thing is computable or not? So there is also still a question, can we there's some certain things obviously we cannot compute, but how we would know that we cannot compute them, or how we know that we are able to compute it? Next to this, we have the measuring things and how to define things, if like within, for example, a definition of a pile or a small member. But then in all of this maybe pushes us back to the need for the measurement or the definition of measurements. That will be a good topic for our book, indeed, to sort of come up with a scheme for this. But now let's back again to the measurement problems. Some people try to escape with this by the weak measurement postulates. Like, okay, you can sort of go slowly in the measurement and you can observe the collapse of the wave function in real time. However, there is sort of some switch between when you have a control on the quantum system and where you aren't, and then suddenly the collapse happening. So there is something happen here when the system interacts with the observer. So whether the consciousness is altering it or not, that maybe will be an open question. But this is now pushes me to the definition of collective human consciousness by Elon Musk, where he said that the humans can act as a collective being. And this argument like a multifold. So he said that, okay, if everyone on the planet collaborate together, then people can define good political system or good ideal system for all humans. What's your take on this?
I disagree with that. Just straight up, I just disagree with that.
And
There's
for
an
what?
author, yeah. So there's an author I really like. His name's David Graeber. Unfortunately, he died in COVID of pneumonia. But he's sort of my go-to author for everything you know is wrong. I just finished Debt: The First 5,000 Years of History, and then Utopia of Rules, Bullshit Jobs, and The Dawn of Everything. These are just like, his books are just incredible. The Dawn of Everything got a lot of criticism because he basically just upended all of anthropology. He starts with like human history from 30,000 years ago past the last ice age and says, how do political systems develop? And the answer is, however, there's basically an example of any type of political system you could have possibly imagined that has existed and we have evidence for. And right, this is some way of like all of humanity at that time working together, and those systems fall. And then, so my take on Musk, and maybe this will be the hot take that gets me in the most amount of trouble, is that we as a society have decided that wealth and intellect are the same thing, and they're just not. Musk had a couple of good ideas, and he had a couple of good gambles that paid off, so now everyone thinks that he's sort of godlike in his decision-making theory. But if you evaluate it from a mathematical standpoint, it's like, is this guy serious? Is this guy serious right now? He's just relying on his money to be able to say stuff like that. That's how it feels to me. I don't know the guy personally, and so I don't want to shit on him personally, but I feel like a lot of his ideas now are just sort of like crazy, and he's got a lot of money and thinks he can say whatever he wants. I just disagree. I think what he said there is just totally wrong. I don't think that's how humans work. We're collective up to a point, and then we're competitive at another point, right? This is two parts of humanity that are always necessary. There's competition and collaboration, and they're always necessary for humans to get stuff done. So this whole collective like utopia Ubuntu thing ain't gonna happen.
And I think this is a fair point, because that's what this beauty about being humans, to collaborate together and also being able to compete and achieve better results. So that's what also motivates people. But then now this brings me to the idea defining and collective consciousness of all humans in this way. This is like a robotic system. So this pretty much everyone in the wealthy club in the world envisions that all humans can work together in a specific way, in a predefined roles. You feel like, okay, there's a way of imposing robotic systems on humans, or to work in this way, and that's also might be reflected in scientific collaboration systems and so on. So what's your take on this, Rowan? Do you envision yourself playing a certain role for your entire life without growing or
No, that would drive
changing
me
it?
crazy.
Time to be extra spicy. Be spicy now.
I don't know. That sounds like the Borg. It's just, so science just generally has always thrived on collaboration, whether it's across borders or having to learn a new language so you can communicate, so you can work together across disciplines. We're all trying to solve common problems, but we all come at it with our own unique perspectives. That's what makes it work, I think, because I have different ideas and interpretations than you might have. And together we can form a really good theory as to what's happening. If we are all kind of just collectively sharing these thoughts or focused on just, getting one role done, I think you miss out on a tremendous amount of opportunity here to understand things, to grow. I don't think that's ever going to happen. It sounds like very much the next Apple TV show or something. I don't know if you've seen Pluribus recently, but that's all about collective consciousness. And they don't seem very happy. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's a realistic argument, but don't give any people like Elon Musk the idea. I don't think that would be bad.
Yeah. So that brings me to the, because now saying a collective consciousness for all humans and so on, that's also what force somehow in this definition having very smooth collaborations between everyone on the planet, sharing knowledge and the information. But now we hear a lot of national voices, including the one that's in Musk's club, about having okay, we need to stop collaboration or having our own knowledge and so on. So I'm myself advocate for open source, and I believe Clark also as well, for open source codes and open source community and open source knowledge to share information to a decent level to all communities. So to give awareness about especially the topic, maybe not the specifics of the business, but at least to not to stop sharing the knowledge. So how this would work in definition or collective consciousness, because this is what means that we all have to share the knowledge. But again, there is some other voices who claim, no, you don't need to do this because we have to keep our competitive advantage alive. So what's your intake on this, Clark?
I mean, it's right. It's both and, right? There is, I mean, we're both advocates for open source things, but I'm open source up to a point, right? There's also business to be done. You don't need to share everything, and right there are a lot of things scientifically and mathematically, especially, where open source really works. But I think a lot of the breakthrough in science. I was reading recently about the Wright brothers, right, when they were building the airplane, and apparently what they did better than everyone else is that they, very much like lawyers in training, took opposing sides of the argument. Right, they were brothers, and they'd say, "I think this is the way it's going to work," and the other one would say, like, he would just take the antithesis position. And they would just debate for like an hour, really hardcore debate, and then they would switch. Then they would switch the sides, and then they would sort of decide what they thought was the best way forward. And like, I think the reason that they made so much progress is like from 1913 to 1916, right during World War I. They're doing this, and if you can look at their airplane designs from 1911 to 1917, there's like a totally different world. And it's just these two guys basically debating their own brother, really competitively debating to try to come to some collaborative agreement. But the point was that collective consciousness, it's sort of a nice utopian ideal, but that's just not the way that we're programmed as humans. I think we do better. Nassim Taleb points this out, right? The reason that our region of the world was so rich for like 10,000 years partly is because of the geography, and it was just commerce. Right, the way that you have to interact with other societies is commerce, right? And that's kind of a competitive thing. Like, if you think about an open market, I have something I want to sell you, dates or pistachios or whatever thing. You two are going to bid, and we're going to have some discussion until we sort of settle on the equilibrium price for the day of that thing, right? So it's competitive and collaborative all at the same time. I have goods to exchange to you. You have money to give to me, and we have to come to an agreement of where is a fair or close to fair price, right? It's not just like, here, have my dates, Ran, have my pistachios, ya habibi, here, just go away, I need nothing in return. This is not this is just not how it works, right? There
We
has
can
to be
tell you,
some competition
Habibi,
and
have,
has to be competition and collaboration. They always come together.
or maybe we can tell you, Habibi, have both for you. So that's because you so
I need
then
nothing. I need nothing.
we do it. I need nothing. Yeah, definitely. But that's well said, Clark. I think that's very crucial and a critical point, because now, of course, we need to not tell about the specifics of the business, because this is what keeps the advantage of the business. But the knowledge, or sharing the knowledge about the presence of the achievement itself, might help driving the competition in a good way. And maybe this is why there is also the patent. When someone files for a patent, they don't really give all the spices used in or the ingredients used in to cook the recipe, but then they give idea about the presence of this new recipe that they have developed, while protecting the commercial rights and the derived rights out of it. That's still a good intake And this brings me to the second question, which is also algorithmic. We are still in the algorithmic and computing realm, but also connected to our social life. So there is impact of algorithm in our life. So everything now we see is sort of controlled by the algorithm. Maybe some people claim this, that we are controlled by what we see and what we observe on social media and so on. And this might be driven also by the advances of AI and computational knowledge. So how do you feel that your life is very likely or will be very likely to be designed as a sequence of applying an intelligent algorithm that might impact your personal traits? So let's start with Euro One. How do you envision the impact of algorithm on your life?
That's a good question. I think it's already there. I mean, that's awesome. It's a concern that comes up more and more. It starts as a collective consciousness, whether it's we're all browsing Instagram or whatever, and it can evolve very easily into a collective surveillance system. So, yeah, right off the bat, we need to draw a line between connection and control. So, on one hand, it's beautiful that we can share things, open source, human machines doing things. We can access knowledge pretty much anywhere, access our friends, our family. But, that there's the other side too. So that same network also can be used to monitor. It becomes invasive. So cameras, sensors, everything easily can turn into surveillance. It already has in many different aspects. It's not just science fiction. I mean, you see these Ring cameras, everything, right? So, okay, basically the challenge isn't whether it's happening or what we do. It's already happening. I think it's already going on, and we need to make sure, I guess, we're aware of it and find ways to connect but opt out of some of this. I mean, I think we need to decentralize a lot of the internet. It's very much owned by, 2, 3 people. Every single website now. It's a lot different than when I was young and was on the internet. You could go to, 1,000 different websites, all different types of things, all different content. But whoever controls the algorithm kind of controls society, right? Like they show you what they want to show you. They kind of connect you or disconnect you from people as well. So obviously something I'm really passionate about. I think it's already here. It's already happening. Some of us are already very aware of it. Some of us might not be. And I think this is something we need to continue to talk about and dive into.
How about you, Clark?
I think that was an excellent response. I don't really have anything to back that up. But I was just thinking like slightly that the collective consciousness in terms of open sourcing, I think Wikipedia kind of did that for us the best. Right? There are
Definitely, yes.
Obviously there are advantages to doing pieces of this, but I think Rowan makes a really, really, really good point of there's a line between collaboration and control, and we're back to fuzzy logic again. We're back to fuzzy logic.
Yeah, totally agreeing on this. But this also brings me to this question, because now, as you said, Wikipedia did great job in doing this sort of collective knowledge that we have. Everyone has a fair chance to contribute to editing Wikipedia. Others might reject these edits, and then you sort of get a sort of a voting system for the knowledge that will prevail or will last on Wikipedia. However, now with some AI models, there is some push for this AI models to rewrite the knowledge from one perspective only. And if you have one company or two that controls the whole internet, they might control the knowledge and the factual, or maybe what's to be called factual things that are published online. So regarding the excellent response from Rowan and your remark, Clark, now the question becomes, in this vast amount of knowledge that might be controlled by the algorithm for commercial purposes or for any other purposes, how for an average person that maybe he or she doesn't have the means or the knowledge or the expertise to distinguish between the facts and the wrong facts or the misleading facts. So in a nutshell, what do you think about the simple way, or a very simple way, that a person can use to verify the information they read online? So let's start with Clark this time.
This is something I've been very, very, very actively preaching on the social medias for the last year. And, again, back to Nassim Taleb and to Daniel Kahneman, right? What Nassim Taleb calls the inner bullshit detector, right? Kahneman's a bit less crass, but for me, it's a simple what we used to call the smell test, right? If it seems too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Until I get some verification of this thing, I'm just disbelieving it, right? And this sort of right now in half of the AI and quantum computing breakthrough newses, right? It's like this could lead to so okay, I'll wait till it does, right? And so there's there's this
Yeah.
very aggressive filter I've started building in for myself for like filtering out what is worth my attention, right? Because we're just flooded with so much news from every direction, right? Just information coming in like a fire hose, coming in just all the time. Unless one has like a good filter, you'll be what a good friend of mine used to say, a victim of the last thing you heard, right? And you know, a
Yeah,
lot of people,
that's
they come with a new idea every day. It's not really an idea. It's just something they were told online and say, did you know blah? And it's like, that's not even remotely close to true. So, you know, I think to work on building up your inner BS detector, right? You have to have some like really good set of heuristics, and even if they lead you astray sometimes, the majority of the time you're going to be better off for having said that doesn't seem right. I mean, I had a good friend in grad school who just anything I would say would be like no, and he would like make me this even in math PhD. I would say like some lemma, and he'd be like, no. And he would like make me prove it, and it actually made me a lot better as a mathematician. But now I sort of get it, right? He's just like, no, I'm not gonna accept that right off the bat. Of course, he was a lot more aggressive about it than I am, but I right now have this very strong filter of I just don't think that news is going to pan out.
but then now this also brings me to the point, because now you can be regarded as an expert because you have a PhD, or one as a PhD as well. Then now you are two experts who can well equipped to filter out the misinformation that are present online. But if someone who has not no enough expertise to verify, they might reshare, repost, and they are gonna believe. For those people, what do you think could be the good measure or the simplest way of measuring things without the need to have a PhD to verify, or at least to be able to judge on what they read, whether it's good to be true, or it's partially true, or complete true? So, what's your vision on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a PhD, among other things, truly just teaches you don't trust anything, verify for yourself, figure it out on your own. I think the average person is at a disadvantage because the way science is written, it's really complex. And that's a good thing because it is a complex topic, but also it's a really bad thing. There's more of a push in science now to try to communicate, write your paper, use all the complex jargon, but then also like translate that for the average person, because I think that's really important. So what the average person can do, I think, is when you see a headline and it links to a paper, open that paper up and go to the methods section and look. If it's an article about the latest advances in birth control, and in the methods they tested this new drug on 20 men, I'm going to trust it as much. If it is, new cure for cancer, and it was done in just a pilot study of 50 mice, that it's not going to affect me very much. So looking at the methods is really important, and there's a section in papers called the discussion, where the authors themselves write about what the purpose of their paper was and kind of like what went well, what didn't go well, how they kind of pieced the information together. And I think that's a good place to start. But I would like to say, having a PhD helps me in molecular biology when I'm reading papers. But it's not just, molecular biology that you see the headlines and the disinformation. It's just everywhere. I mean, news articles are posting crazy clickbait titles. We're all Middle Eastern, so I think we have a very good bullshit detector already built into us. I think we are very quickly able to say like, this is nonsense. But not everyone has that. So I think what the average person can do is, one, talk to different types of people. Just expand your social circle and just look at different perspectives on some topic. And then two, and this goes back to the Wikipedia thing, you can have factual information and not change the facts, but the words that are used matter. So you can convey anything you want using different types of word choices and change the meaning entirely. Words mean things, and we are slowly moving away from the true meanings behind words. And not only that, but choosing really specific words to kind of automatically paint certain people as villains or victims or aggressors or whatever it is. You can see this in any news article, any headline. So keep in your mind, why are they choosing that word? Does it have any kind of emotional connection? Chances are, yes, it does, and they chose it deliberately. So you'll see that everywhere, not just in science.
I like, thanks, Rowan. I like that Middle Eastern, because we all came originally from Middle East, have the bullshit detector. So I think added this to the PhD, which every one of us has, maybe that helps a lot. But for the regular person who wants to verify, then that's a good advice to talk to communities. And maybe a podcast like this can help them a lot by listening to this podcast to verify from our community and listening to other communities certain facts by listening to broader speaking communities in different topics. Then they can gather things, because there is no absolute fact from one source. They have to gather from multiple, and maybe we need somehow to support this. So now we are approaching the end. We wanted to know what's your wishes for 2026. So let's start with Clark. What do you wish in this year?
Well,
or what do you dream of achieving this year?
Yeah, well, so, 2025 for me was just the absolutely most insane year of my life in every possible measure you could have. I made the most amount of money. I visited the most amount of countries. I saw the most amount of things. I did the most amount of speaking engagements. I had the most amount of sickness in my family. The most amount of it's like 2025 was just absolutely insane in every possible way for me. For my wishes for 2026, everyone have just a slightly calmer year. Like for me, just a slightly calmer year, and for everyone else, just to have a slightly calmer year. Right? We're right now we're in the throes of having all sorts of crazy political stuff in the United States, and some of it good, some of it bad, a lot of it bad. But it's like just I really just want things to calm down a little bit. Right? I mean, 2025 was a bimodal distribution. I prefer a much more normal curve for 2026. That's my wish.
I share the same wish with you. I had also similar sickness, and also people who passed away. So that was also crazy. But yeah, we get also fun by meeting you in person in Egypt, and the hackathon of Alexandria, the quantum hackathon, and so on. So how about you, Rowan? What do you dream of, or what's your wish for 2026?
Honestly, same. I wish for a calmer 2020. My year last year probably wasn't as bad, but it still felt like too much at times. I just want calm. I want everyone to be healthy. I want us to just be able to pursue, careers, but also things that make us happy in life. I'm trying to do more of that just outside of work, actually going toward the things that make me smile. So that's my wish. It's just more of the things that make us happy and more calmness.
Yeah, sharing the same wish with both of you, to have a calm 2026, like very calm, and to learn and quietly without any surprises. So Rowan and Clark, I really thank you for being present and also accepting the invitation for the podcast, and looking forward to hosting you again in future podcasts. So stay healthy, and I wish you a happy new year.
Happy New
Thank
Year
you very
to you
much.
too.
Happy
Thank you
New
for
Year.
having us.
Happy New Year.